thanks. Like, hey, Scoob, did you hear Nikki Blake is hosting a Scooby-Doo panel? No. Yeah. Like on today's Scooby-Doo episode, Scooby-Doo and Shaggy meet Nikki Blake. Yeah, and a Scooby Panel. Like, we need to get this puppy started. Okay, Nikki Blake, take it away, Scooby-Doo.
Welcome to the Scooby Panel. I'm your host, Nikki Blake from ScoobyAddicts.com, and today we'll be talking to artist Ruth Elliott-Hilsdon. I'm joined by Wendy BRYDGE, Cameron Bates, and of course, Ruth Elliott-Hilsdon. Ruth, thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to have you.
And thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So my first question is, can you tell us how you became interested in art and walk us through your career?
Well, my mother was an artist, and I was always exposed to like great art. She would just put prints up on the wall, and I thought every kid had like Degas and Picasso and everything all over the walls, and I just took it for granted. And so like she could draw real fast and would amaze all of us with everything. She'd draw Santa Claus, everything during any holiday. And so I tried to, copy whatever she did. And then when I got older, I went to the High School of Music and Art in New York City. And I just always was drawing. It was like, from the time I was like 8 years old, I remember drawing something and thinking, this is something I know I could be good at. So, and then loving children, because kids and art were my two favorite things. I wanted to make the world a better place by having children who knew they were loved. And also I wanted to be an artist. So I ended up having 7 children. And, but before I had 7, and when I was, I guess I was around, actually around 29 back in 1970s, the late 70s. And I was not at working in animation at that time, but I went to one of my friend's houses that had, she was moving. And we were just helping her move, and I was carrying a painting to the truck, and I looked at it and I thought, now that's pretty good. And I knew that I could draw too. So and it was her brother's painting, and I said, "How's your brother?" And she said, "Oh, he's fine. He's working at Hanna-Barbera and making $350 a week." Now, back in 1970 something, that was a lot of money. Because everybody was lucky if they made $100 a week back then. So I thought, what? And I think I had some kind of job where I was making $100 a week. So I said, and I can draw like him. I need to work at Hanna-Barbera. So I said, what's your brother's phone number? And that was the start of it all. Her name is Diana, and at the time, her name was Diana Barnhart. Now it's Diana Coburn, but his name is Philo Barnhart, and he's actually very famous in the industry. Great illustrator, animator, everything. Well, when I called him up, he looked at my stuff and he gave me he said, "Oh, well, let me give you the phone number of this guy, that guy." So I went to 3 different interviews, and it just so happened it was the very last year that Hanna-Barbera gave their free class in assistant animation. And so when I went there, I talked with Harry Love, who is now passed on. And Harry Love said, "Well, we know you can draw, but you're not trained in any particular category of job. But we do have this class. And so you can take the class, and we don't have any jobs anyway right now because we're mid-season, in between seasons. And once you get done with the class, then if you can do it, then maybe you'll get a job here." So I went through the class, and it was like 5 months or something, and it was just wonderful. I mean, actually somebody in the class, one of the helpers was Barry Cook. He ended up being the director of Mulan and stuff, and he was like 18 at the time, you know, just a young skinny kid with a big fro. And because I was already, you know, very domesticated by then, I would always bring cookies. So everybody thought I was the cookie lady. I would bring cookies to the class. And then after the class was over, they said, well, you're ready. As soon as we get an opening, boy, you can start working. So I said, well, they said I'm ready, but I need a job right now. So I went around to some of the other studios and I, you know, started showing them my portfolio. So what Ruby Spears told me, they said, yes, we would like you to start in 2 weeks. So I, you know, by this time I was already like friends with Bob Singer and Harry Love and everything. So I called up Bob Singer and I said, hey, Bob, guess what? Ruby Spears said that they could hire me in 2 weeks. And so he said, what? He said, well, it looks like we got 2 weeks to find you a job. Because they'd already put all the work into teaching me, right? And so, I mean, I don't know why I, you know, felt like doing that, jumping out and asking for somebody else to hire me, but I guess I was desperate. But at any rate, so instead of the animation department, which hadn't opened yet, the way the season goes, they have to do the models first. They create all the models so the animators know how to draw the guys, right? So he said, well, we'll get you a job working in the model department until the animation department starts. So sure enough, they got me in there working in the model department, doing cleanup, cleaning up the roofs. And I worked with not only Bob, but I worked with Sandra Young. Has anybody mentioned her?
No.
Well, Sandra Young is a really beautiful, wonderful person who has passed on now. It was such a dear person who we all loved. And when I worked with her, I learned so much about how to draw well, and she just was a fabulous artist. She was the one that actually designed and helped to clean up a lot of the drawings of the Scooby-Doo characters, in addition to Bob and Curtis Kim also. And they noticed that I was good at like drawing very, very neatly. So they gave me a lot of like mechanical things to draw, like buildings and boats and airplanes and things that, you know, I drew everything that they gave me to draw. And it was really a lot of fun. Gosh, and right down the hallway, because where we were, we had these cubicles, and on either side of the hallway, there were cubicles that were like, some of them had very low walls, and so you could peek over, and down the hall was like Floyd Norman, and I believe, let's see, there was, Scott Shaw, Mark Kirkland. And so I got to be friends with all of them too. And Iwo Takamoto's son, I don't know if you know Iwo Takamoto, he was the guy that,
Oh yeah.
you've heard of him, right? Okay. Well,
yeah.
he's so famous for designing Scooby-Doo, you know, the dog and everything. And so his son worked in the model department as well. And so we all had a great time. And when you walk down the halls, especially when you'd go past Floyd Norman's cubicle, there were always like cartoons plastered all over the walls, you know, and they would always joke about, you know, like you could tell, like Floyd would do a cartoon of Sandra talking to somebody else, you know, some little joke that was going on. And they'd always like caricature each other. So that was so much fun. And I couldn't believe I was in with these great artists, because I just felt so like, in awe and humbled by all of their, wonderful talent. And it really, it is amazing how like it rubs off on you when you're around other people who are better at what you do, you get better and better at it. And so I got to be better and better at it. And I was so excited to be, to grow. And Bob Singer was so helpful. Every time I'd go into his office, like I'd be terrified, like, am I going to get fired or something? When I'd show him my work, but he was always like so humble and so sweet. I felt like, I was so honored that he wasn't mean. In fact, everybody there was very kind. And that's what really struck me about the animation business, because the people are just so wonderful. Because they're having fun. They're not doing
we have
something
heard that from everybody that we've interviewed, that it was just such a wonderful environment at Hanna-Barbera.
Yeah.
That everybody got along really well and worked together, and
yeah. And like even when I had to do things like over again, like and like they gave me corrections to do or something. Gosh, there was a wonderful fellow that I had to work with at one point, Jay Sarbury. I don't know if you've ever heard his name, but he was such a kind gentleman. And every time you talk to him, he would treat you with such respect, and he'd say, "Now, I don't mean to in any way insult your intelligence, but have you thought about this? What a great way to tell somebody that you have to fix something or make it better, So it was totally unlike other jobs I'd had. So it was really wonderful. And I'm trying to think of some of the other fun things we always would do. It was just wonderful. I went from the model department into working in the assistant animation department once the model department job was over. And one thing I have to mention that was fun. Bob Singer, who did have to design a lot of the extraneous characters, the ones that like, they're not the main characters. They're just like people walking around and stuff in the background. He'd always like use people who were in the studio as his like, you'd look at that character and say, wait a minute, that looks just like Tim over there, or something. And sure enough, and so then when he'd look at you, like, you think, I wonder if they're going to put me in one of these characters. It was a lot of fun. It really was really great. And so let's see some of the other wonderful people that I met. Well, Bronwyn Barry, she was like my big helper that was assigned to me. And she was a couple of cubicles down when I went to the other floor where they had the assistant animation. And she was the one, I guess, assigned to me since I was a beginner. And she helped me a tremendous amount. So anytime I had a question, I could go to her and she'd help me. And then, gosh, so many people were wonderful. Bob Go, who was one of the heads, and John Borzema, and also I got a chance to wander around during break. That was my big excitement during the day, lunchtime or break time. I would go to the other departments because my goal always, from the time I was a little kid, I used to make my own flip books. And so I would try to think to myself, like, boy, if only I could draw Bugs Bunny, then I'd be a real artist. And so I would try to draw things and I'd make my own little flip books. Well, when I started working at Hanna-Barbera, I thought, when I grow up, I want to make my own cartoons. So I wanted to know how they did it. So I went around to every single department and I would ask them, what do you do? What do you do? and they'd explain it and I'd say, oh, really? So then I learned about, you know, the fact that they had to have layouts. And I believe that Don Morgan was his name, I think. He worked in the layout department. And so I learned about layouts, and then I learned about, after that, then by then they were starting to Xerox our drawings instead of hand drawing them. So I went to the Xerox department and I found out how they did that. And then I went to the ink and paint department, and it was so quiet. I couldn't believe it. I said, oh, these guys must be working so hard, but most of them were deaf, and they would all be going, talking to each other a mile a minute. So they were really making a lot of noise if you could hear what they were saying. But during the breaks, you know, of course, they were talking a mile a minute, but it seemed always so quiet down there. And that was like, let's see, Allison, oh, I got to remember her name. She was wonderful too, who was the head of the ink and paint department. So I got to meet those ladies and find out what they did. Then, pardon me. So then luckily, in between seasons, when there was no more work and I still like, I need a job. So they, at one point, John Borzema was so kind. He said, I know what will really boost your knowledge is if you can work in the corrections department, where all the outtakes, like they find something wrong, that like somebody has a mouth and it's going over here instead of over here, you know, or something, then they have to fix it. Then you learn so much about the exposure sheets and how everything, you have to know exactly what layer each cell goes on, and have to line them up and make everything work. So I worked in the correction department for a while, and that was fantastic. I got to meet all the checkers and find out more and more and more as I went along. And that was just a wonderful education. And I just loved it. It was just great.
I love that you just kind of took it upon yourself to make sure that you went to every department to see what was going on and how things were done. That's totally something. I mean, I've always been so interested in how they do things with animation, and it's so different now because everything is digital.
Right.
But yeah, that's really cool.
Well, I was so disappointed that I looked at all the equipment and I said, oh, this machine that they do the pencil tests on, it's going to cost $1,000, or this machine's going to cost that. And I said, how can I make my own cartoons? So after that, you know, it's sort of like, it was just like waiting and waiting for so many years. But finally, by the time I got to the point where I actually knew what I was doing, then they came out with computers that could do it all, as long as you had a scanner and a, you know, computer and basically ability to put them into the computer and stuff, and editing machines and stuff, so, or editing software. So that was really good. And so I have been able to make several of my own cartoons, and that's been fun too.
Great. That's great.
Yeah.
Do you remember what series of Scooby-Doo you worked on? I'm thinking it was probably the Scooby-Doo show.
It was, I'm sure it was the Scooby-Doo show, and then I worked on Scrappy-Doo as well. And I should review my own on IMDb. There are so many different places that say what I've worked on.
Doesn't have any of your Scooby credits on IMDb.
It doesn't?
No.
I thought they did.
No, I think it starts with the new Shmoo as the last, or the earliest thing that's on there is the new Shmoo. Yeah, it doesn't have anything from Scooby.
Well, I thought it did. Geez. Oh my goodness. Well, I should add them. I know it says, geez. Well, maybe I'm the one that needs to update it or something. Sometimes they will update stuff. Right. Like when I worked on The Simpsons and stuff. But yeah. Well, I do remember that I worked on Scooby for, from 1978, and then Hanna-Barbera, I worked there till 1988. So, and as far as like the years that I worked on Scooby, gosh, I don't know which ones were produced during that time, but it was probably like 3 or 4 years or something like that. I really have to look in my records on those, but it was really wonderful. And I remember getting to draw some things like the monster with all the, there was a big blobby monster, like that looked like made out of mud. And
The
then
car monster.
The what?
Car monster.
Oh, so you know all about it. And at that time, I was so busy raising kids that basically I learned to love Scooby-Doo on the job, because before that time, I didn't have a chance to watch TV very much. So just, working on them was wonderful. But one of the fun things about having kids and working on Scooby-Doo was that when my kids were little, I would feel guilty because, like, with all these kids and wanting them to be very healthy, I gave them only like an apple and a peanut butter sandwich for lunch, or some kind of sandwich, and then they'd have their milk or whatever. So they always would say, "Mom, why can't we have ding dongs? Why can't we have Fritos? Why can't we have this or that with like the other kids?" And I'd say, "Well, it's not as healthy. And by the time you eat that, you won't want to eat your apple," and blah, blah. So I was like the very mean mother. Well, so then I'd feel guilty. So I'd always give them a little napkin, and I'd draw a picture of Scooby or something in it. And I put it in there with their sandwich. Well, I was doing this for like weeks and didn't get much response from the kids. So I thought, "Kids, do you really like those little napkins that I give you?" And they'd say, "Oh yeah, don't stop." And then years later, they told me that they were trading them for ding dongs and for Fritos and all these other things.
Oh my God.
That's the greatest. So, well, there went all my health food dreams out the window.
Oh my God.
But that's okay. It makes a good story later on.
Yes.
Really funny.
Oh Lord.
Wendy, you have some questions?
Okay, so you did answer a couple of these already, so I'm just going to skim my questions here. I wrote them out so I wouldn't forget, but I don't want to just ask you something that you've already answered us. So you had a number of different actual jobs while you worked at Hanna-Barbera. So did you ever, so we know that you worked on some of the model sheets and things like that. Did you ever work in like the paint department? Did you ever paint any cells?
Well, only for fun. I learned how to do it by watching them, and I bought some equipment so that we could do it at home and let the kids, practice drawing some, and they didn't do much. So, but it was just for fun.
Yeah. Do you remember, did you work on the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo? That was the one with the Vincent Price character. Because that, I think, guys, was that in 88? So it might have been just when you were on your way out. But
I was already on my way out, because I think the last project I worked on was the Jetson movie. And that was, so I didn't get to work on that one.
Oh, that's too bad. That's too bad. It's one of my favorites, because apart from Scooby, I'm a huge Vincent Price fan.
I enjoyed that when I watched it later.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you get to meet William and Joe?
Oh yeah,
you were working
I did.
In the studio?
I forgot to tell you about it. In my wandering around the studio to try to find out, because one day I asked somebody, I said, "How many people work here?" And they said, "Oh, about 350. And I said, "Wow." And that's what got me on my mission first, to find out, because I thought, why do they need 350 people? So when I'd wander around, I'd get to, I met Jane Barbera in her office. I met, what's his name, Ray Patterson and his daughter who worked in the checking department, and Iwo Takamoto. And also I met Mr. Barbera and Mr. Hanna. Now, one of the funny things that happened was I got to be friends with the secretary. And so she said, well, Mr. Hanna would love to, you know, just have lunch with all of us. We'll just eat in here. You can join us sometime. So I brought my guitar and I played a song and, you know, had some fun just being with them while we were all eating lunch. And we had we had lots of fun chatting. Then one time after I started working at home, because part of the reason why I wanted to be able to work at home was so that I could, you know, be at home with the kids and basically watch the babysitter if I had little ones. So one day I would go in once a week to bring my pile of work, because they trusted me by then that I would bring it back. So they'd give me a pile of work at the beginning of the week and I'd bring it back at the end of the week. Well, I brought my little son one day and he refused to put on his regular clothes. He had just gotten he was like 2 years old, and he had just gotten his like Superman underoos, and he wanted to wear his Superman outfit. So I had a little piece of red cloth, so I quickly whipped it up into a cape and put it on him. I said, okay, let's go. And we ran off to some work. And I stopped by the office once I got my work, and oh my gosh, my son took dashing off and ran into Mr. Barbera's office. And in Mr. Barbera's office, he had like a row on either side of his the hallway. He had this row of big stuffed animals, like there'd be a Yogi Bear, a Scooby-Doo, all the different characters that he had in, you know, big in effigy, so to speak. So Michael saw them and he ran right past them into Mr. Barbera's, you know, little inner sanctum. And I said, oh no, I'm really going to get in trouble now. But I ran after him, and Mr. Barbera was so sweet. He was just so loving to Michael, and said, oh, honey, you want to touch this guy? And he was showing him all his stuffed animals. And I think he was aware that, you know, his audience, he knew which side the bread was buttered on, that he had to keep this audience going, you know. He was just so kind and very nice. And then later on, after I had discovered, at one point, I had this book that I was reading that one of my family members had given me, that had Mother Teresa and pictures of all the things that she did. And I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I mean, you see all these, like, the babies they're throwing in the trash can that she was rescuing. You see all these poor people with leprosy that she's helping. And I felt so bad having family with kids and everything, that I wanted to do something for them, but I didn't have any money. I needed all my money just to survive, help my family. So I thought, and I was making $350 a month, a week, approximately. And I thought, if only I could give them one of my paychecks. And then all of a sudden that number, 350, it sort of like went boing in my head. And I thought, there's 350 people here. If I could get $1 from each person, we could get enough money to send her $350. So that made my second trip going around to all the different departments and saying, hey, look at these pictures. Would you be willing to contribute $1? And so within less than 2 weeks, I say, going in during the breaks, I collected $350. And Mr. Hanna and Mr. Barbera both contributed. Plus, you know, some people gave more than $1 each. So it didn't take me as long as I thought it would. And we sent her off the money, and I got a handwritten reply from her, and it was so
Great. That's wonderful.
That's so amazing.
Yeah,
That's
that
really
made me
great.
feel so happy. So everybody there was so nice. I mean, nobody was mean or greedy. They were all really nice folks.
Yeah, we love hearing from people that work there, and just to have that consistency in everyone's story, that it was just like a wonderful place to work, and that you were treated like family, and there weren't people making you feel uncomfortable or that you weren't good enough or anything like that. Because today I feel like it's hard to find that today. It's very rare, and perhaps it was rare at the time too. I mean, you did mention that at other places you worked, it wasn't quite the same atmosphere, but I think that is such a testament to why we're still talking about the cartoons that you guys made in that studio, because it's obvious that you all had a passion for what you were doing. Like, you truly loved the business, and you loved the people that you were making the cartoons for. And I think that is why if this is just my opinion, I know Disney has been around longer, but I personally think that Hanna-Barbera is more popular in the hearts of fans than even Disney is.
Mhm.
That I believe that.
Well, people are attached to those characters. They love Daphne, they love Fred, and I mean, if you asked me to tell you which one was my favorite, I wouldn't be able to really tell you, except for Scooby, maybe.
Right.
And Shaggy, I loved Shaggy. He was fun,
Mhm.
and he wasn't hard to draw either. Oh, that was wonderful. There was one other thing I wanted to mention, if it's okay.
Yes,
That
please.
one of the best and most memorable experiences I had was meeting Art Scott, and I don't know if you've ever heard of him. Art Scott. Well,
don't know
Art
that
Scott.
name.
When one of the neat things that happened was when I was talking to Mr. Hanna, I asked him. I said, "How did you start this company?" And he said, well, he said, we were working so hard, like 6 or 7 years or something, working on all those Tom and Jerry's and everything for MGM. And he said, we did everything. We were doing layout, we were doing animation, cleanup, storyboard, everything. And after all of us giving our blood, they laid us off. And he said, and now, he said, what happened was, we thought, how could they lay us off? We did everything for them. Why? And then all of a sudden their light bulb went off, and he said, we realized, hey, we can make our own cartoons, right? And he said, so getting laid off from MGM was the best thing that ever happened to us. Now, the three guys were Mr. Barbera, Mr. Hanna, and Art Scott. Now, Art Scott was one of their chief beginners of Hanna-Barbera. In fact, they probably should have called it Hanna-Barbera and Scott or something. But I don't know why Art Scott didn't want to, get his name in the lights or whatever. But they started it in Art Scott's garage. And when I went to his office and interviewed him, he told me that he built his own little multi-plane camera out of wood. And he said, and here's the plans. And he said, here, you can have them. And somewhere in my files, I've got these plans of the multi-plane camera that he built by himself. He says, I don't need it anymore. I mean, he didn't give me the actual thing. He just gave me a piece of paper with the plans. But wow. And he was so nice, because if I was doing my own little story that I was writing, and I could show it to him, and he'd say, well, see, if you do it this way, it'll be better, and showed me some tips on storyboard and stuff. So I just loved Art Scott. He was so sweet. And he entertained people when they'd come and show little kids and do little demonstrations of how to draw Mickey Mouse and stuff when people would want to come by the studio. So, but he was a wonderful guy. So
Yeah, that is really nice.
yeah. So I'm wondering, what is there anything else that you wanted to know?
Yes, absolutely. Oh, honestly, I could keep you here all night asking you questions. So you obviously have worked in animation for a very long time, even apart from Hanna-Barbera.
Mhm.
And as we've established, you've done a number of different jobs within, like underneath that animation umbrella. So not just at Hanna-Barbera, this can be from anything that you've worked on in the world of animation. What was the most challenging job or the most challenging aspect of a job that you've had to do?
Well, a little girl asked me what that once. She interviewed me for career day. And she said, she came with her little pad and paper and said, what are some of the dangers of the job? And I said, well, falling asleep at your desk. Because a lot of times working on a deadline, if you know that they only have like a certain time to get this thing done, and you have to, put in extra hours, even if they don't pay you or something for those extra hours, especially when you're working at home and you have to prove yourself that you're not just, goofing off, because they don't know what you're doing when you're at home. So Harry Love had always told me, if they hire you and you say you're going to work an hour, give them an hour and a half. He'd always say that. He was like, I guess he was just a really hard worker himself. But so I would always work harder, and sometimes I'd be up till 2 at night trying to get my work done so that I could bring it in on time. And it was night after night. So the biggest thing was the exhaustion level with 7 kids at home, and a lot of work. So I went without sleep a lot. And I think I'm so blessed now because I'm finally getting enough sleep.
So when we were doing research, obviously, because we wanted to know more about you before we met you,
Ooh.
I saw the loveliest picture of you with June Foray. And so I was wondering, when you were working specifically at Hanna-Barbera, how much, if any, interaction did you have, you and the other artists, how much interaction did you have with the voice actors?
Well, not much. I did meet Lucille Bliss and she was working on the Smurfs. She was, I think, the voice of Smurfette or something. But I met her in Art Scott's office one day, and she was lovely. But I didn't really get to meet many of the voice actors. However, June Foray they were giving I guess, a special. She was doing a talk, and this was years later when I was working, I believe, at Disney, and it was either Disney or Warner Brothers. I can't recall at this time, but she was giving a talk, and I went to it, and at the end of the talk, I went up and approached her, and just said, June, I love you. I mean, I couldn't help but love her, and I'd love to be able to talk to you a little bit more. And I gave her, I told her about the nonprofit that I had started at that time. And it's edudesigns.org. And it was because they'd taken art out of the schools in my son's class. And I was so disappointed that I said, this can't be. And so I started this nonprofit to bring art back into the schools. And I was doing all these free art, things for the kids. Well, so I told her about that, and she said, oh, I'd love to hear more about it. And she said, come and visit me at my house. And I love to go to the Habit to have lunch. We could go to lunch. So I went to her house, and then we went to lunch a few times, and she was just so nice. And she gave us a donation to our nonprofit. And she was always so kind. So then years later, when I was making my own little cartoon, I was already still in communication with her. So I told her about this cute little cartoon that I was working on. And I said, and so everything's ready except for the voiceovers, and then we can start animation. And she said, well, I'll help. And she was so nice. I couldn't believe it. And so I said, really? Oh my gosh. I didn't even think I would ask her, because like I just held her in such high esteem. And so when I just went to her house and brought my little laptop and my recording equipment, my microphone and everything, and the script, and recorded, and she recorded all 4 voices. And they all sound different. And so that little film ended up being the last thing that she ever did before she passed away. And so that was really wonderful. And I think that picture that you saw her, that you saw of her and me was taken at the Annie Awards, because I used to always go to those events because those were my friends.
Yeah.
And I met a lot of other people at the Annie Awards too. Well, one other thing I was going to tell you about. Oh, does anybody remember The Princess Bride?
Yes.
You like The Princess Bride? Oh, that's great, Cameron. Well, me too. Well, when I was working at Warner Brothers, and I was drawing the two-headed monster, or the two-headed dragon, what do they call it? Mm-hmm. And one of the heads of the dragon was, I think, Eric Idle, and the other one was Carrie Elwes, the guy who played the Princess Bride. Well, so one day, we're slaving away, drawing our little guys there, our little dragons, and then one of the girls says, guess what? Today, Carrie Elwes is coming to do some recording. And I went, what? I couldn't believe it. I said, you've got to tell me when he gets here. And so everybody was going, psst, he's on the first floor. Psst, he's on the second floor. Pretty soon he was on our floor. And so I ran over there. I guess I'm not shy. Anyway, I went over to him and I said, oh my gosh. I said, I just have to tell you that my children love The Princess Bride. And every single year, this was when we went to this church down the street, every single year, the youth group plays The Princess Bride and in the basement, and all the kids lay there in their sleeping bags, and they have an overnight and they watch it on the wall. And so every year, and they love that movie. And he said, oh my gosh. And he said, and how many kids do you have? And I told him I had 7. And so, but he said, how amazing. My mother had 7. I'm one of 7. Oh, and so we were instantly friends. And he gave me a big hug at the end of our conversation. But we also exchanged autographs. I gave him a picture of the dragons with my signature, and he gave me, he signed one of mine that had a dragon on it. So it was just fun.
That's awesome.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
That was really a great moment for me.
Oh.
Yeah, I can imagine for sure. So you said that if someone asked you who your favorite member of the gang was, you wouldn't necessarily be able to answer, but probably Scooby or Shaggy.
Mm-hmm.
But do you have a favorite Scooby-Doo villain, either one that you helped design or that you worked on, or just one that you're aware of that you watched with your kids? Do you have a favorite?
Oh gosh, I'm terrible at picking favorites. I don't think I could. But I loved them all. I mean, it was really wonderful. It was just great to watch all the shows. And finally, when I got started getting addicted to them myself, then I watched them all. And every time they were on, I'd say, "Hey kids, look!" And if they would, I say, "And look, if you slow down we'd always VHS everything." And I said, and if you slow down the VHS, you might see my name, like real fast, 30 names, So, but it was fun to at least say, see, it really is there.
Yeah. Were your kids excited
Yeah,
that you worked on all of these cartoons? And did they brag
were.
about you to their
They
friends?
were.
That's
They
good.
were. And anytime we'd go to any kind of screening of a movie that I had worked on, normally you go to the movies and as soon as the credits come on, everybody leaves. But in the animation world, you sit there and wait for your name.
Oh,
So fun. And then they'd go, there it is. So it was fun.
Oh, that's
It was
great.
really
That's
fun.
so
Awesome.
nice.
Yeah.
That's so nice.
Yeah.
I have just one more question before I let Cam have a turn.
Okay.
This, I have to admit, this is me being selfish asking this because I have been working as a commission artist for almost 20 years. And I know that there are other artists who watch the panel and who have been on the panel with us. So this is a question from all of us artists. While you were working with Mr. Singer, or any, I mean, all of those artists are top tier in a category of their own, and I include you in that. Absolutely. You guys are just, you have your own category. There's great artists of the world, and then there's Hanna-Barbera artists, and you're all way up here. So it doesn't have to necessarily be Mr. Singer, but any of these wonderful artists that you've worked with, was there any tip or trick while you were also learning to do all of these things that you could share with us that would potentially help us in being better at what we do?
Well, absolutely. In fact, one of the things that that I learned from Bob Singer right away, he one day, I guess it was before the season had started, and we were practicing. He'd given me some stuff to practice drawing, and he'd given me a picture of like Fred Flintstone, and so I basically, it was just like drew it a single line, you know. And then when he looked at it, he said, well, make sure that you darken underneath Fred Flintstone's nose. And I said, why? And he said, because it'll make it pop out. And so he would teach me how to make, you know, weight under things by, like, instead of a shadow, if there's no actual shadow, you could still create weight by the underside of any thing that would be sticking out, like a nose. Make it a little darker under there. And so that was one tip that he taught me. And gosh, and then of course flipping, which nowadays they do it in the computer, but paper flipping, and that was something that I was very happy to learn. So
Yeah.
and I'm trying to think of anything else, but gosh, and then leaving a little white of the eye in the center of the pupil to make it look shiny, you know. So but gosh, other than that, it was wonderful to find out that Scooby-Doo was actually like a real dog. I mean, when Iwo Takamoto designed him, it was the first time they had a cartoon character that like really looked like a real dog. It was based on the Great Dane. So it was nice, and you know, it was nice. You knew that you were drawing something real and not something just cartoony. Nothing wrong with cartoony, but
yeah, no, Scooby he stands alone. He's amazing, and obviously we all love him very much. So
right. Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. Gosh.
Cameron,
Okay,
you have some questions?
I do. Ruth, I just gotta say, I love listening to your stories. I mean, you're a phenomenal person. So seriously, I'm soaking all this in. You know, when I was a kid, and I kind of, not trying to go into a story or anything, but I'm going off with kind of what Wendy said. You know, I grew up in kind of the boondocks here in Texas. And so when I was younger, I used to go to a library, and I used to get all these books about Hanna-Barbera. And I go home and I do all my research about the studios. And I would also, they'd have old VHSs of Scooby-Doo and the Jetsons and, you know, Speed Buggy and Johnny Quest. And so I'd take those home, and yes, VHS for anybody that's listening.
Yes.
So I'd always pop in the VHS, but I'd always do my research, and it was just some kind of magic about Hanna-Barbera Studios. And from you talking tonight, I can just tell that y'all were a family there.
Yes.
And that it was true magic. And something about when that rainbow would always just, and it would say, HB at the end, it was Hanna-Barbera, and to me, I never really got into Disney. And I respect Disney on some things, I really do. But I always just, Hanna-Barbera was my thing. I loved it. Scooby-Doo was my cartoon. I loved them. And so, I got two questions for you. My first one to you is, we in the community, in the Scooby-Doo community, we truly love, Scooby, Fred, Daphne, Velma, Shaggy, and Scrappy. We love them. I mean, there's controversy about Scrappy, but we love them. But there is some characters that we absolutely love that don't get brought up much, Scooby-Dum and Scooby-Dee. Now, I know you worked on some of the characters as well. Did you ever get to work on Scooby-Dum or Scooby-Dee?
I don't think I did. And when I heard about it, I think I don't think I worked on them.
Yeah.
There was a lot of times when we'd just have a scene and we'd have to finish the scene and we didn't even, pay attention to where it fit in the story so much, except for the title or it's production number 163 or something like that, So that was, I wish I knew. I worked on Scooby-Dum and Scooby-Dee. I might have, but
I get you. The Scooby-Doo show was my favorite series. So to know that you worked on the Scooby-Doo show, I mean, that's just incredible. I mean, I love how y'all did the art styles, how it was light for a cartoon, but it was still dark. You know what I mean? Like if Scooby and the gang were walking through the swamp, I mean, it kind of looked like like a scene from a horror movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it was that cool. So I think it's, and people say I sound like a broken record when I say this, but I love how y'all balance light and dark within the art styles that y'all did. So that's truly incredible. And I got to say this, and this is my last thing, but when I was looking at your IMDb page, I was seeing everything you did, and I was like, this is incredible. You got to work on all these amazing things. But one thing that really hit me, and it's a cartoon that never gets talked about, but I loved it. I've seen all the episodes, and I've had to stream them online because I've not been able to find them, is the Incredible New Shmoo. I loved that cartoon. And so can you tell me more about that cartoon and how I mean, I know we love Scooby-Doo, don't get me wrong, that's our top cartoon. But the New Shmoo was just, it was so fun. And it was kind of like Scooby-Doo. Like they were, they ran their own comic strips, and then for anybody that's listening, like it was a cartoon where it was like this little white creature called the Shmoo, and he would just transform into anything. So could you tell me about your experiences and about the show, if you don't mind?
As far as like just learning how to follow the model sheet and draw, that's all I have to do. Yeah. So it really, I wish I could tell you more, because it was just something that, it was just one more thing that I had to work on.
Yeah.
So, but I loved all the shows. When I finally saw them, I'd say, oh, that's what I was working on. So I got to see such a little section because, I think there were, there were 60 assistants and 30 animators. I believe that's what they said. There were twice as many assistants as there were animators, because the animators could crank out the stuff real fast because they were rough drawings. And then we would have to come in and do the cleanup of the extremes, and then do the in-betweens in between those extremes. And so we had more work to do. It took longer than the animation did. So so that's why when all those 60 people working on all these different scenes, we would get them, they'd all be chopped up, and we wouldn't necessarily have a chance to do much. But I did love every show that I worked on once it was finished and I got to watch it.
And I love it.
But also Joanna Romersa, she was a wonderful lady. I don't know if you've had a chance to interview her, but she's still alive. It's wonderful to find these people still alive. So she was one of the animators and also one of the heads of the assistants. That was wonderful working with her. And there was something else I was going to share with you. That you all, if you are at all interested in art, pursuing it like Wendy mentioned, and if you would, any of you, if you would be interested in being a guest speaker for my group of kids that I teach art to kids. They're not all little. Some of them are 16, some of them are 8, some of them are different ages, but all really good candidates for working in the industry. And so I'm starting a special series for them of introducing them to each other, and as a group bringing in special people to talk to them. And so Wendy, if you're an artist, you could come.
Oh, I would love to. Are you kidding? Are you
Wendy,
kidding? I would be honored. My goodness, I can't believe you're asking me, so I'm not going to say no.
Oh, that's wonderful. And you know, Cameron and gosh, Nikki, you're all artists in your own right, I'm sure. I mean, you'd be, and you could talk about the industry or something if you're interested. So, I mean, I would love to welcome you to enrich the next group of animators.
Well, I just gotta say, I'm so happy you asked Wendy, because let me tell you something, right? I'm not just saying this because Wendy is one of my close friends, and we work together on the panel, and I think Nikki can agree with me. Wendy is one of the most incredible artists I've ever met. She is just, her art is, and I'm not just saying this just to make you feel good, Wendy. I'm being legit. Wendy's art is just truly beautiful, and she captures just something in each project and piece she does. So I think she'll be phenomenal to talk to your group. Seriously.
Oh, that's wonderful. I would love that. That's great.
Sure.
Well, yes. What were you going to say, Cameron?
Oh, I just want to say one more thing, and then I know Nikki's going to take it over, but I just want to say thank you so much, because you worked on the Scooby-Doo show, you worked on the New Shmoo, and those were 2 cartoons. And I know this may sound cheesy, but those are 2 cartoons that really made me feel safe as a kid when I was little. And just to know that you worked on those shows, I just got to say thank you. So truly, you're an incredible person, and I love getting to talk to you. It's an honor.
Thank you so much, Cameron. Well, you know, what you said about the dark and the light in Scooby, that was the thing I really appreciated about the Scooby stories, because they were scary enough to give you a little thrill as a kid watching them, but you always knew that it was going to come out okay, and that nobody was going to die, you know? And so many times, actually, in my presentations, when I'm doing art stuff for schools, I will tell the kids that the 2 ways that you can show emotion, and this, by the way, is one of the things that I learned at Hanna-Barbera. The 2 ways you show emotion are the eyes and body language. And so I'll always mention Scooby-Doo. I'll say, have you ever seen a Scooby-Doo show where they're in the dark and all you see is the eyeballs, but you know exactly how they're feeling, if they're scared or if they're happy, you know, because of the eyeballs. And so that's something that, and all the kids love that, and then we'll draw eyeballs and stuff. So it's a lot of fun. Well, thank you so much for bringing that up, Cameron. That's really great. And wow, you guys are awesome that you're doing this for, you know, for everybody who gets to watch and learn more.
The goal with the panels is to let all of you tell your stories, because you work behind the scenes and most people have no idea who any of you are. And it's important for us that people know who you are. You guys did the artwork, you guys brought Scooby-Doo to life. And the other characters. So to us, it's really important that we let you tell your stories, and we love hearing them. So
We really do.
Well, that's great.
yeah.
There were so many wonderful people that I probably left off my list that had helped me along the way, like Bonnie Callahan. She was a background artist, and she actually gave me some lessons in painting backgrounds. And I don't know if you guys have seen this book. Have you seen this, the Hanna-Barbera Treasury?
Yeah.
I sure have.
Oh my gosh, it's got so many things in it. And Jerry Beck put it together. It even has little mini cartoon books and things that you can look at, and all kinds of information on cartoons in Hanna-Barbera. It's really great. So, wow.
I have one more question for you. You brought up Joe Ruby and Ken Spears, and you said that you interviewed with them. Did you know them? Did you get to know them?
No, I didn't. When I went to interview with them, I don't know which one it was, whether it was Ken, whether it was Ruby or Spears, but it was one of them. And they just, looked at my stuff. And unfortunately, I didn't work there. So, but fortunately, I didn't work there because I got to work at Hanna-Barbera. But it was wonderful. And I'm so grateful for Bob Singer for giving me the chance to start. He's the one who really was responsible for me getting my foot in the door. And Harry Love, who let me go into the class. So
Amazing. Bob Singer, we did get to talk to him, and he's just an incredible person.
yes, he is.
Yeah.
He really is.
Yeah.
Oh.
Ruth, you are a beautiful person. We have sincerely enjoyed talking to you. I love how animated you are. It's great. And have you ever considered doing voice acting? Because you totally could do voice acting.
Yeah, you could do that.
You really could.
Well, for my own little cartoons, yes. And if anybody wants me to do any voice acting, I can do all kinds of different voices. Anyway, thank you very much. What a wonderful compliment.
Yes. Thank you so much for giving us your time. We really enjoyed having you on.
Well,
it's so much fun talking to you and learning about your career, and listening to the stories. It's great. And thank you so much.
Thank you. I feel very honored, and you guys are awesome. I'm so thankful I got to meet you all and talk to you, and hope we get a chance to chat again.
Absolutely.
Anytime you ever want to come on the panel, we will gladly have you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And when you brought up how your son wanted to dress like Superman, my son used to wear a Pikachu costume. Pikachu's a Pokemon.
I love
Pikachu. And he would wear it everywhere. So we would go food shopping and he would be wearing his costume. So yeah.
And what are you gonna do? You gotta say no?
Right. It wasn't hurting anybody, and he, it got him to go to the store. So I mean, yeah. Sometimes you just have to do that.
That's good. That's great. That's fun.
All right. Well, thank you again so much for your time. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Well, thank you, Nikki, and thank you, Wendy, and thank you, Cameron. You guys are awesome. I'm glad you're doing this. This is a wonderful platform for everybody to honor Scooby-Doo.
Yeah. Thank you.
Have fun.
Thank you for tuning in to another Scooby panel. I'm Nikki Blake from ScoobyAddicts.com. If you like these panels, please subscribe to my channel for more great discussions. A very special thank you to animation artist Ruth Elliott-Hilsdon, artist, blogger, and Scooby collector Wendy BRYDGE, and Cameron Bates from Scooby-Doo and Cameron Too. Scooby and Shaggy were voiced by Scott Innes. Check out Scott's website, onescottshop.com. Scooby Panel is available in podcast form on most podcast platforms, or as a web series on YouTube. If you would like to support the Scooby Panel, please go to patreon.com/ScoobyAddicts. Scooby Addicts artwork by Will Davenport, video editing by Nikki Blake, music composed and performed by Bovine Nightmares. Please join us next time for another Scooby Panel.